Welcome to the Chasing Your Dreams podcast, a place for you to find the wisdom and powerful strategies for overcoming obstacles and making your dreams come true. Here is your host, Eric Hall.
All right, welcome back to the Chasing Your Dreams podcast. Please subscribe and help the channel grow any way that you possibly can. Today is a different episode as you get to really see some people that's actually chasing their dreams, as I welcome, a panel of interns that's willing to help the field in any way they can, as well as helping themselves today. So I'll let them have a chance to introduce themselves and the school that they actually go to here in a second. But realistically, just trying to, put some information out here that really helps them move forward in the field as they look forward to help in any way they can in the health profession. And also for our fellow social workers, man, as we try to advance the field. So from top to bottom, Ms. Emile, I'll let you introduce yourself first.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Amira Givens, and I am a BSW intern. I work with Mr. Eric Hall very closely.
Mm-hmm. Tell them what school you go to.
Oh, okay. Fayetteville State University. I'm on my last year. I'm a senior.
Okay. Good job.
Much it. Thank you.
All right, let's go, Miss Emile. What you got up there for me?
Hello, everyone. My name is Amel Al-Katani. I'm an MSW student at North Carolina Central University. I am in the Advanced Standing Program. So this is our second year, considered second year.
Okay. All right, Mr. Washington, introduce yourself.
Hey, how y'all doing? My name is Thomas Washington, and I go to Fayetteville State, and I'm in my last year of the MSW program.
Okay. All right, well, we know why y'all are here, man, today. You guys get a chance to ask me any questions that you want. Hopefully I can get you the answers that you need, and hopefully it benefits others to have some of the similar questions, that you guys have, and I definitely appreciate you guys having the courage to do so. Ms. Givens, one of my interns that definitely worked with me closely at the office, she definitely, came up with a great idea to start this panel and try to get y'all, what you need, and y'all was on board with doing the same exact thing, with really trying to help. So let's get it, man. Whoever got a question for me first, man, let's get it started.
Okay, well, I guess since I brought the idea, I just go in there, say a question. So my question for you, I guess for like upcoming social workers and current social workers licensed, are there clients for who you find that it's difficult to advocate for, as far as like them playing their part in their role as well as getting their resources?
I don't feel it's hard, to advocate for any client, right? If you just kind of see some type of injustice, right? So ethically, one of the things that, needs to take place when you guys transition into the field is just kind of understanding what those core ethics is, because one of them just kind of being social justice. If we can kind of see some type of injustice that is done, the client usually is the one having to communicate and tell us what that is. Normally what you're trying to do is get alignment with the client about whatever that injustice may be and see what the best plan is to move forward, right? So you would never do anything in terms of trying to advocate for a client if it's going to bring them more home, right? Because they need to be on board with what you're about to advocate for, meaning they're going to let you know in some kind of way that some type of discrimination and injustice is taking place. And the next step is to be, okay, now what do we do about it? Which is, where we become very vital, when you guys come into the field and really get started. You already have that buy-in because they're going to be telling you, okay, I need something from you in some kind of way, shape, or form. So when it comes to advocacy in general, usually that's one of the easier things to work hand in hand along with a client. Now, it is some stuff that becomes more difficult, but advocacy, I think you'll be fine in that situation for sure.
Okay, so now that you're talking about stuff that's like more difficult, how do you handle when you have different perspectives than your client as far as scenarios?
Okay, great question. I mean, one of the main things you always got to do, man, is have a client-centered approach. They call it person-centered approach, to each of your clients. You really got to try to meet each client where they're at, right? To try to really get to know them as you start to really build that engagement and rapport, which is really the first vital part of treatment. Like realistically, before you can start to provide any intervention, anything that you want to do with a client, you got to get to know them, and that you need to make sure that they understand you're there for the right reason, because you'll start out, man, honestly, in the field with a client, and they might miss sessions, or they might not come back as frequently. Something is going on in terms of engagement. So we need to troubleshoot to make sure that we all on the same page. But, normally it's about getting that buy-in in terms of whatever those goals are and expectations that they want to accomplish. And somehow you want to get that alignment. Like, you want it to be the majority of their workers coming up with those goals and things, because they're going to be more likely to kind of follow through with whatever plan you help them put in place to be successful.
Okay. It makes sense. So, like, as far as your client, of course, you want them to, well, self-determination is a big thing. You got to let them be themselves. And then as far as helping them be, like, successful and stuff like that, what do you think are, like, core issues that you have frequently with most clients that's, like, most in common with your clients as far as working in the field?
Across the board, normally when I'm getting a client, normally they're identifying that, okay, I have an issue that I've noticed and I'm wanting to work on, I'm willing to work on it. And I'm choosing you to probably work on it with, right?
Right.
So ultimately it becomes on the individual level, trying to see exactly what that issue may be, and not really try to be cookie cutter about how we address it, right? Because I believe in, like, we go get EBPs, like cognitive behavior therapy, we do strengthening families for intensive at home and stuff like that, right? But each EBP is designed for you to also apply it to the family that you're working with, right? Like, it needs to make sense. Like, you can't just do each intervention exactly the same with each one of your clients. Like, that's not what the best evidence is showing you. There's a connection piece that shows on the individual level, we need to work off this individual's strengths, their weaknesses, and their motivations to get that buy-in, to get the best outcome in terms of treatment. You spoke of, like, self-determination. So, like, in the field, when we start thinking about self-determination, normally you're trying to respect what the client wants, right? And, more times than not, when I see that come into play, you're probably talking about an elderly client having to make decisions for themselves. If they have the capacity, you follow through with what they want. It's that simple, right? Like, don't try to, tell them that they don't need that they need a service and they don't, more so than anything. And then if others are coming in and trying to, advocate and talk on their behalf, if it's not a release of information or anything like that on file form, you don't do it. So, it's certain things that you just got to pay attention to keep yourself from getting in a pickle. And the most important thing, man, is just kind of listening to what the client says. Like, identify who the client is and listening to what they're saying they want. And that's kind of how you start to really respect their self-determination into what they want to do ultimately, right?
Right. That makes sense.
Okay.
I have a question.
Let's get it.
So, what is something that you wish you would have known or that somebody told you while you were in the MSW program?
Whew. All right. That's a great question. Loaded question. But I'm going to tell you, the most important thing, right, when you leave the MSW program and even your field work that you're actually doing, going into practice, something I wish someone would have told me, I kind of got insight, just kind of paying attention. Like, a lot of schools are not, like, necessarily clinical based, right? Like, that's the truth. Like, when you start to talk about going to a school of social work, you get some of the core values and stuff like that, but you never really scratch the surface of, okay, now it's time to go to work. And all that may entail in terms of, like, okay, what are the documentation requirements? You probably ain't wrote a legit note the way it need to look in the field. Why? Because you writing grad school papers, right? So you got all these papers and stuff like that. And, I see a lot of clinicians that come out struggling with that piece from just the documentation point, where you start now, you have an expectation to probably start doing what's called diagnostic or clinical assessments. And you don't even understand where to go with that, right? Or just, I wish I would have even understood how much more important the DSM-5 would have been to me, right? Like, I didn't realize how much of a guide that really would have provided to me, into the sense of me really getting out into the field and really working it and utilizing it so much, right? Because in school, you work on, like, the core diagnosis and stuff. You even do projects to use them. So you start to kind of understand the signs, the symptoms, and things to look for the common diagnosis. But what happens for those diagnoses that fall outside of your realm, right? You got to keep working. Like, you got to keep getting better. So you got to do your homework, educate yourself. And it's many different ways of doing that, because I do understand people learn like many different ways. But the core of it is that DSM-5, right? Like right now, until they get something else in place, you know, we need to kind of understand what is in it. And I wish, you know, more than anything, I like structure, right? Like from the time you start, like clear structure on what should take place within the first 30 days or the first week. What should the first week of work look like? Because a lot of ACs, they come in, you know, they're going to hire you guys once you guys get that licensure, and they're going to have expectations. I want you to be clear on what those expectations are for yourself, so that you can be honest and try to, whatever gaps are missing, don't wait to like later on down the road and be like, oh, wait, well, you didn't teach me this. No, go ahead and let them know. Like, if you got questions in the beginning, ask them like, okay, am I going to get training in this? Because you guys you got to have a different confidence. You do come to the table with something, and it's okay not to know everything. Nobody does, not even me, right? And I've been doing this for years, but I'm constantly learning new stuff, right? And that's kind of why there is a requirement even after you get that license, like you keep taking, like, for example, those 40 CEUs over the course of 2 years. And I say, you know, always get those towards the population that you work with, right? Like, always trying to get sharp, because the skills that you utilize and practice the most, you're going to easily be able to do that no matter who the client is. But if you're taking CEUs just to pass the time by, man, you're never going to use those things. So you're going to forget them. So constantly trying to work with the population you guys ultimately decide to is going to be important. So mainly coming from, you know, my MSW program into the field, in short, you just want to make sure structurally you understand what the expectations are of you. That way you can get the training that's required for you to be able to meet whatever those expectations are.
Okay, yeah, that was some good insights, especially because right now we are very focused on the DSM-5. So knowing that it's going to be extremely important in the future is good. I have another question.
Go ahead. It's on y'all. I'm taking up the time. We'll make sure I get everything y'all got for me addressed.
Okay, so what are some common mistakes that new social workers make, and how could we avoid those?
New social workers, the most common mistake that you make is trying to be somebody else. Well, most, not you, but most make is trying to be somebody else, right? I pride myself on telling, like, even like my clinical social workers, right, that come in here, like, on an associate license, because I provide clinical supervision. Just be yourself. Yes, you can pay attention to what people do well and learn it, but it still needs to be you. You need to be yourself. You need to be genuine. When you work with these families, they're gonna know, right? Like, they'll be able to look right through you and see. Like, be confident. Like, most social workers, when they first come into the field, they're not confident in themselves and their abilities. Like, you got to grow. That's why you got to associate licensure. So you're going to make mistakes. Just don't do nothing that's crazy outside of the realm of social work. And the way you do that is get really honed in on your core values, you know, really look at the NSW, you know, and really kind of understand what you should and should not be doing, because those are the standards, right? And if you're operating within them, it leaves little room for error. But, you know, I've often seen social workers, right? Like, they try to regurgitate stuff and they try to say it, and I hear him saying and mess it up. And I'll be like, man, that's not you. Come on, man. Why are you even trying to do it? Because genuinely, that's not going to help you. Or, you know, you just want to make sure you're on point in terms of like the documentation stuff. Like, don't copy and paste like the common stuff that you'll hear across the social work field in general. Like, don't copy and paste. Make sure the notes are individualized to the consumer you're working with. Like, just the generic stuff that normally social workers make coming into the field. It always start down from the ground up, right? Like time management, you know, that's the biggest thing I see. You know, they get all these expectations overnight, right? Like, you get that licensure, and then overnight you're trying to make sense of what does this mean. Over the next 2 years, you got to get 3,000 hours of clinical practice, and then you got to get 100 hours of supervision, right? Like, so you start really trying to make sense of what this needs to look like. On top of that, you still got to get those 40 CEUs. That's just for you guys' first 2 years prior to you even being able to take the exam over the course of the next 2 years, right? And hopefully go ahead and pass so that you can apply for your full licensure. So a lot ultimately gets thrown onto their plate. What happened was, as a part of this new licensure process, is It used to be where you had to also pass that test within the first 2 years, right? Now you have a little bit more time to kind of hone in on your skills. With anything, it has its pros and cons. Sometimes I see social workers get, further and further away from the material and wait till they get to that 2 year mark and start to really try to prepare for the test. After that, it's like you're learning everything new. Why it's like right now, you guys, when you come out, you're going to be fresh. Like you're going to know a lot of this stuff like the back of your hand. So keep learning it. Like don't put it to the side. Like keep learning, keep using it, because that test prepares you to kind of think like any common social worker across all states, not just North Carolina, right? Because oftentimes I hear clinicians, say, well, I do it this way at my age, or I do it this way at my age. And then you see they fail in that test because they're trying to respond that well on the exam. And that's not necessarily how it should be. You got to understand, like, you're held to a higher standard as a social worker, right? Once you get that license in your hand. So it's not enough to just be reporting right away. You got a licensure to assess certain things. So if you see marks, ask questions. Where did they come from? What happened? Then once you get enough information, you can report it. You're just held to a higher standard. So you just got to understand exactly what that means and carry yourself as such.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. Looking back on your career, is there anything you would have did differently? And if so, why?
Oh, man, looking back over my career, the first thing I would have done differently now that I actually know the landscape of the field. My bachelor's degree, when I had to pivot, from thinking I was about to go to school for sports medicine, not having that program, was criminal justice. I also went back and got a master's in criminal justice because of what I was ultimately thinking I was going to do. Looking back over all of that time now, I know what I'm doing. I wish I had a golden ball that would have kind of told me I was going to stay with this field, because I would have saved myself some time in terms of all these years of school for sure. I would have went ahead and got my MSW a little bit quicker, which is why I commend you guys. And I think I told all of y'all something to this effect. But you guys are going to get a head start in this field even quicker than I did, in the sense of being able to get that licensure quicker, being able to move a little bit faster, and be able to honestly, if you do everything that you can more times than not the right way, man, you guys are going to be able to make a good living for yourself while also helping many people in this world for sure. So the number one thing I would do would have saved myself some time. And then realistically, that would have also bought me more time to really just hone in on my skills, as I was working with families. I would definitely get, well versed in like many different. So when I say evidence-based practice, because I've been saying EBPs, that's evidence-based practice. This is saying because of evidence, this best works with this population, right? So I really specialize with children, adolescents, and adults. So I got specialization with all those populations. Mainly my heart started with the children and adolescents for years, right? So my early years, that's all I really worked and touched and did everything that really could ultimately impact that population. I would say early in my career, I would have went ahead and, really dived into, also seeing adults and trying to figure out what that meant for me at that particular time. I guess in the beginning for me, that was the fear of working with adults, right? Like, everybody has their niche, and I'm not saying, this has to be your route. Like, you find your niche and you can get comfortable doing it. But then as you grow it, you might grow into working with other populations, because that's how it happened for me. I was set on being like, I could have went the rest of my career, honestly, just working with children and adolescents, because I coach that population. I'm constantly around them, I got my own kids. So it was commonplace for me, right? Like I always felt I had that connection with people. It was easy for me to go back and talk to the youth. And that's also how I got my start in the field, going back when Robert Davis gave me my first start from what I talked about in that first podcast. But the main thing is, ultimately I had to grow. And what forced me to honestly do that is to get out my comfort zone. Is when I went to the University of Southern California, they noticed that, like, okay, all his experience with children and adolescents, he's great there. And although they let me take any specialization courses they had, they challenged me to do something different. So when they chose my placement, they forced me to have to be ultimately working with that population of adults. Not understanding what that would have meant for me long term, it made me get out my comfort zone. But guess what? It forced me to go back and get my licensed clinical addiction specialist on licensure as well. because I like they just work with those adults and see the difference in what I thought versus what was reality. Like I seen that we really could make a difference. Probably before then I had my own bias of thinking, man, them adults, they gonna do what they want to do, right? Like they're not gonna listen to me. What they gonna listen to me for? That was kind of where my mindset was at when I initially was, kind of running away from that population. Then I got to be hands-on with them, and I seen a totally different perspective, right? And I seen you could really make an impact because if they're willing to tell you their goals and be vulnerable and let you know what's really bothering them, right? They're really letting you know, like, I need help. And you might be the only person that's willing to listen. Like oftentimes I see a lot of people misunderstood or just not heard, whether it's amongst their family, their friends. And sometimes we're the only one that can really probably save them before things get worse. So if I knew earlier on that, I would be working with that population, I definitely would have honed in and been a whole lot better, prepared for that population when it became that time. But, it really forced me to, buckle down, do a lot of trainings back to back, hit the ground running to really get educated and do everything I wanted to do. Because ultimately, man, it ended up panning out as I got my own private practice. Who knew, like, you got adults, man, that need you. They want you, like they see you. And those were like some of my first referrals, even before the children and adolescents, even though I had a huge name in the community for that population. And it was just easier to feel those, man, commonly. This is just a whole nother chance for me to be helpful that I didn't foresee. So I say, man, always keep your mind open, be willing to try new things. And that's what part of you got to do when all of y'all on here at some point get that licensure. She's going to go back and get her MSW as well. Y'all will be soon finishing graduating. When you get that associate licensure, clinicians make the mistake of thinking, oh, I hate this job, man. I don't want to do this no more. Some of them actually leave the field. That don't mean you got to always do that job. Like, find what your niche is. Find what population you like. Like, really find out what motivates you in the field. If it's where you at and that you don't like, get away from it. Go try something else. Like, but you have a licensure, man. Like, you want to be able to live a meaningful life in the sense of while you're helping others, not taking away from yourself at the same time. Meaning, like, you don't need to be mentally drained and worn out or burned out. Like, you're supposed to be helping, right? So it should be helping you in some kind of way as well. So also that whole premise of self-care becomes important. So every week when I work with my clinicians, I teach them, like, yo, you got to take care of yourself. Like, in order to really help other people, you got to help yourself first. So how are you detaching from this stuff? What do you do extra during your week? Do you work out? Do you watch TV shows? Do you watch movies? Like, do you go out and play video games? Like, different things. Like, I always start different ideas, but I like to hear what they do weekly. Every week they'll tell you. I'm asking, like, they already know. I want to know what you did over the last week to take care of yourself. Because if not, man, you will get burned out. You know what I'm saying? Because it can become overwhelming if you don't create balance in your schedule.
You talked about self-care. So how do you maintain your self-care, and especially in the field that deals with your emotions and, the intense work?
Honestly, one of the best things that ever happened for me, man, I played football as long as I could, right? But the fact that I got to coach it, and again, something that came out of left field, never would have expected to be coaching, especially, long as I've done it. But it definitely has provided an outlet, when I'm finishing up with work for the day or whatever the case may be. My mind when I'm on that field is what I be educating everybody else on is on football. It's on those kids. I'm laughing, I'm joking, we having fun. It's not on all of the other stuff. Like, I get to really be present and be there. Why it's a whole thing that's in this field. Like, I benefit from this field in so many ways, right? Because it's this whole thing of like mindfulness, right? Like being like present in the here and now. Like, people have to get used to. Like, me understanding that I'm allowed to put my mind at ease and understand, like, yeah, work is going to be work. Like, it's going to be things I got to get back to and prioritize and really make sure that things are in place. But I'm allowed to be there and be present when I'm there. And then when I'm at work, I'm present at work. At times, I try to work out multiple times within a week. On average, I used to work out 4. Then it got down to me just trying to get back to 2 to 3 because of all the expectation stuff that they start falling on my schedule. Again, having to try to create that balance. spending time with family. You know, as a clinician, I tell you, it's going to be important that when you get in the field and working and stuff like that, that you start to kind of plug that stuff in your schedule like you do everything else, because you don't want to let the time just pass by where you're just, you know, kind of walking by each other and not getting anything accomplished. Like, you want to give them that time as well, whether it's you guys watching a movie together, going on outs together, eating dinner together, whatever the case may be. Some of the same things that you'll put in with your families would actually help, because if you're consistently doing some of those things around the clock, even I educated in the ethics training on this weekend, like, the more times you do something, it becomes easier for you, right? So if you put structured things in place that's working for your families, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be utilizing some of those same things because you're going to believe them. Like, you know, I don't put things in place with my clients that I don't believe going to work, and that's the truth.
So in the field, what are you most like passionate about as far as what do you want to accomplish for all your clients once like you're done with the session? Because sometimes, you know, it's gonna be a time you might have to say goodbye.
Honestly, man, I just want to see growth in all my clients, right? And what that may look like to each individual may be different. I want to impact all of them in some kind of way. Once they meet me, you know, this part of just my belief in myself, and, you know, I don't want to come off as arrogant, but I do. I try to pride myself on just trying to be the best. Like, that means in the sense that I'm trying to give my clients the best. Like, I know it's other great social workers and stuff out there for sure, but I'm talking about me specifically. When I'm working with my client, I'm trying to be the best I can be for them to get what they need from me. And it really helps me to see that they're seeing some kind of benefit in coming to see me or working through things with me, because now it gives me the strength to keep coming, right? Like, to keep doing and keep me getting better as well. Like, it gives me the focus. Like, I get like laser focused in on certain things when I hear them say certain things, or if I see something gave them some type of momentum. Like, for example, you know, recently, you know, talking to a client that came in and was like, yo, honestly, I ain't told nobody this, but I was suicidal this weekend, right? And then it's like, huh? What? You know, so I would handle that kind of like anybody else. That stuff still catches me off guard, right? But now what I'm trying to do within that session is what? Okay, let's assess here. Let's see what's going on. Is there a means? Is there a plan? But bigger than that, because that's what they're going to give you guys in school, right? Let's instill some hope. Let's see what's there. Let's see what's going on. Let's see what got them to that point as we assess, so that we can strategically come up with a plan to help, you know, ensure things are going to get better. Not tell them it's going to get better, but strategically set up steps and plans for them to get it better. Because there's a couple of things you guys are going to have to understand once you get in the field, when clients start coming to you, that you consider like to be a safety concern, right? Like, at the top of when you start testing, people will teach you like, okay, this is the top of your acronym safety. You always look for safety first, right? Meaning anything without like hopeless or down, like, you want to be able to make sure you assess for like suicidal ideation, right? Well, the main thing that you ultimately got to do is make sure the person understands what they do have in terms of support, you know, in terms of like the things that they feel they don't, just as much they telling you what they don't have, you highlight those strengths and things that they do. And if it's just outside of your realm, you know, understanding when you need support to come in and help you with that case. Or if it's a time where it's so severe that you got to do what's called an involuntary commitment, meaning referring them out to the hospital. But, you know, luckily I didn't have to do that. And then a week later, in that client in a totally different place, showing progress, having new goals that they've came up with for themselves. You know, it's rewarding to me that I get to see that. That's more important than anything that they can give me in terms of money, anything else. Why? Because that's making your mark long term, right? Like, I always say, success is made through what happens with somebody that you work with long term. So me being in the field so long, man, I've been able to see kids go to college that I work with, you know, in mental health. And it's like, man, they said this kid didn't have a chance when I started with him. You know, that's rewarding. It's like, wow, you in college. You know, I've had one now that's finishing up a master's degree just like y'all. And she's doing the same exact thing as y'all, you know, because of the work that she put in and the growth she's seen in herself. So, you know, the field itself is just rewarding when you see progress. I called out one of the more severe because those are the ones that you really got to dig in deep and really pull out. But constantly, you're going to be dealing with behavior for the most part. If y'all going in just a regular outpatient, you're talking about probably the opposition defiant disorder kids, at the worst of worst, probably conduct disorder. If you're working with children and adolescents, at the end of the day, you're simply trying to help them change behaviors. So realistically, when you're seeing improvements on certain things, for example, you might get an average, right, of what someone is doing. Like if they're running away from home, they ran away from home like 3 times within a week. Well, progress is going to be if they run away 1 to 2 times. Yeah, we want to work towards elimination for sure. But you always want to set up a goal that's realistic so you don't set yourself up for failure. You want to just have that number start to decrease. Why? Because now you can start to show progress and realistically set up a plan now where instead of working off a goal that was 3 days, we can revise it and let's make it to 2. And we can get them back to down under that 2, now 1. Like you just need to work somebody backwards in terms of those behaviors. Whether it's fighting at school, they get in a fight every 2 weeks at school where we need them to decrease to 1 first as we work towards elimination, right? And then maybe it's only once within a month or whatever the case may be. But it's always gradual in terms of like the decrease. Like you don't ever want to set a client up for failure, and you don't want to set yourself up into thinking that it's going to be an overnight fix, because by the time they get to you, there's probably been years of whatever is going on that ultimately has to be help them get some things in place to correct themselves, right? Giving them the skill sets to really be able to cope, really how to deal with like any anger or whatever comes like with whatever they're presenting with. You only can put the tools in place. So it becomes a component. Like if you're working with children and adolescents, like all of y'all are going to touch. One thing that you always got to do is make sure that the parents kind of understand what progress is going to look like, right? Because you'll be working with a kid, and this is the truth. You might have 2 great weeks, nothing has happened, anything. But as soon as one thing happens, but they come at you like it ain't working. Treatment is not working. I want them out. I want to refer them out. I want a high level, like whatever. Like they be ready to get rid of them. And you have to slow the parent down and educate them. Like, look, we just had 2 great weeks, man. And highlight what was great about those weeks, and then explain to them what it looks like progress long term. Meaning, in the sense that he got to continue to grow. Like it's a work in progress. Like it does not happen overnight. I promise you. In some cases, it just appears like it do because kids start to mature a little bit more, and progress is a little bit faster. Honestly, that's the crazy thing. I told you I didn't really want to work with adults when I was younger. It's crazy, but progress do typically happen a little bit faster for adults, and that's simply because they're already, more mature. They kind of understand what they want out of life. They kind of understand their goals, and more so kind of how they can go about achieving those goals. And now it's easier to start to get a little bit buy-in early on, whereas for like a child or adolescence, they're learning you too. Like they trying to make sure that at the end of the day, they might try to get by on you with stuff as well early on until they see that you're catching it or you're consequently in some kind of way. Like if you're consistent for the most part in this field, man, you can have great outcomes for sure.
Okay.
Can you give us a little bit of insight on what to expect during or for the LCSW exam, and what are the most important parts to study for?
Phew. All right. So that in a nutshell, right? So as you start to prepare for that exam after your first 2 years, the first tip I gave you is not to wait for that 2-year period to start studying, right? Like go ahead and really start to kind of do it. They always release like knowledge, skills, and assessments, like abilities that they want you to really focus on, on that exam, right? But in a nutshell, the exam is 170 questions, of which 150 is scored. I always say think like the exam. There's many different study materials out here. Mr. Philip Trail from YouTube, I always give him a plug because I utilize them some. I do some test prep myself, and I know more recently a lot of people been using like therapist development and stuff like that when they normally come to me. But honestly and truthfully, when you start to study, I believe, man, you can kind of understand your own gray areas, right? Like it's a bunch, in terms of recall that you're going to have to probably open up a book and read. Much you don't like it, you're going to have to do it. Like, yes, you can learn a lot through like questions and stuff like that because, in test prep, we are breaking down questions from top to bottom, and we have an acronym that we might use. and apply it to how you will respond on the first question, how you respond on the next question. Now let's look at these bets and most questions, which a lot of people don't really touch. So I educate people on how to view those questions, even through the lens of what the test is going to be looking for and how you should be responding on those areas. But understand the differences in which each of those questions are asking you and how you should be responding as a clinician. And then mainly, man, just in terms of just when I talk about things are going to be done so differently, practice to practice. Don't try to apply wherever you end up working, whatever they end up teaching you. I'm not even saying that what they're teaching you is wrong. It could just be different structurally for what the test is looking for, right? So understand what the test is going to be looking for. And to do that, I want you guys to really get grounded in that code of ethics, right? Because for your ethics section, for the most part, I believe all of us clinicians, we can kind of blow that piece out the water and we just kind of understand what needs to take place. And that gives us the grace in any other area that you guys will have on that exam, for sure.
Yeah. Speaking about the LCSW, what was the process like for you?
Well, the process for me was I graduated, from USC, and then I went right into applying for my licensure. My clinical supervisor at the time I was using was Mr. Robert Smith. He was at St. Hills Behavior Health. Well, he's the owner of St. Hills Behavior Health. I don't want to say he's there, but he's the owner of St. Hills Behavior Health, and he kind of walked me through each of the steps of the process. So one of the first things that's going to be important for you guys is start with a strong supervisor from the start, right? Because there's so many expectations of what has to be done. So for me, it was me applying for that. You apply, you get that paper back that you've been approved for your A, right? But then what needs to take place? They send you all this other paperwork for you to have a clinical supervisor in place that's going through all the paperwork with you. And more importantly, they're providing structure on what needs to be done, from you having to get liability insurance, from you having to not you have to create a portal now in CAQH, which all of your documents and stuff are in. You might have to go in the NC tracks depending upon which agency you're in. Like, it's so many things that you have to do as a clinician that if you really don't have that guidance, you're going to miss something. So you always want to make sure you start with a strong supervisor that kind of just understand what the expectations are for you, can provide that structure for you, and can walk you from point A to point B. And that's kind of what I did. I just had him to walk me through that process of me getting licensure. And then I started out with a couple of cases, really just trying to make sure I was coming from being like a qualified professional, but now taking over overnight really is kind of how I felt. Like, okay, now I'm going for qualified professional, now I have a licensure, so I'm going to be a team lead. And I wanted to first give myself time to understand the difference in expectations from a qualified professional to a team lead at that time, because I hadn't yet started doing outpatient. So at that particular time, the transition for me was simple. How do I now supervise others up under me? Meaning I was on the team that I was getting supervised by a clinician. Now I have other people up under me that I'm not having to supervise. What does that need to look like? So I had to educate myself on structurally what is required. I kind of knew the requirements just because I was coming and transitioning from being a qualified professional. So now it was a matter of, really setting those expectations, really setting those weekly meetings with my team, and just trying to honestly stay on top of everything, from how many times we were going to meet with a case, from the times, paperwork was due, all kind of things we would discuss. We discuss difficult cases on a weekly basis. Anything high risk is like we discuss those first, and we try to figure out a plan and be supportive of each other, because we understand that the calls are going to be coming, and trying to figure out, all right, let's make sure somebody is needed so we can make sure we there within the time frame that is manageable for us as a team, because we were managing multiple cases at that time. So everything just kind of hit the road really fast for me after I really got that piece in place. And it's going to hit it fast for you guys as well, because I know you're going to be ready to get to work and really put your skills to the test. So realistically, just honestly, get that paperwork, all that documentation stuff that need to be on point with the board, get that right first. And keep your supervisor, stay in good standards with your supervisor. You should be getting weekly supervision. It'll be a little cost, but long term, it'll be worth it, because you're going to be getting those 6-month reviews in which they got to be able to justify all of the things that you've been doing. So you should be able to show that you're getting that clinical supervision. So you're going to get that. Those supervision hours are going to be easy, because if you're meeting with them weekly, they're going to be giving you credit for it, right? And then ultimately you're going to be getting your clinical practice out because your supervisor is going to be monitoring that and talking to you about that when they're meeting with you on those weekly basis and seeing that, okay, everything matches up. You work the minimum of that 30 hours a week. Normally you're working 40, so that 30 really isn't hard to get to. You know what I'm saying? If you actually working a full-time job, you'll get that. So they justify all those hours. It's not even on you. That's what I mean. Like people get overwhelmed thinking like this is a lot. It's not even on you to manage. All you got to do is work. Your supervisor will make sure that you're checking all those boxes and meeting all those expectations for you if you're working with them hand in hand for sure. Any other questions before I let y'all up off here today?
I don't have any more questions. You answered everything.
Okay.
I have one more question.
What
ultimately led you to choose social work over criminal justice, considering that you graduated and got your degrees in criminal justice?
Ultimately, it was just a matter of, what I was being offered in the FBI because that was the dream I ultimately had started to chase us to going down the path of getting into the FBI. I just didn't like the outlook of what I thought I was about to be placed into in the sense of kind of going in the neighborhoods of people that looked like me being fully transparent and then trying to bust them or whatever the case may be. I just didn't want to even take the opportunity to risk, although I was told different things like, nah, that won't happen long term. It's just a start point, this and that. It's just something I wasn't willing to do. And I had already been in the field, honestly, since 2006. And at that particular time when I made that decision to go back to school, I didn't go back to 2015. I didn't make the decision to turn away from criminal justice until it was time for me to leave pretty much in 2009, right after we had gotten married. And ultimately, I just kind of made a decision that it was time for me to pivot, right? Like, that dream died, right? Like, so this here, I guess, is a good point because this is the Chasing Your Dreams podcast. That was a dream that I was willing to chase right until I couldn't chase it no more. Meaning, just because that didn't happen for me, I didn't stop. I didn't freeze. I pivoted into another dream, but like right away, like I found another lane. And what I did was just look at what I had been doing. Like sometimes you just got to look and, really be honest with yourself about your strengths, your weaknesses, what all you have to offer. And at that particular time, I just kind of knew, I had been working with children and adolescents forever. Like, okay, why not just work with what you already do? Like, this is what you do easily. So even if I would have went into the FBI, it was going to be like a real huge learning curve for me, right? Because I was going to be taking everything I learned from school into practice. Well, guess what? With this degree, I had already been practicing for years. I was going to be ready to pretty much pick up and run. So it became like commonplace for me, man. So, I ended up making that decision that I was no longer going to chase that dream. And it required me to go back to school. That's why I went back to school, later on in life in 2015. And I don't regret it, not one bit, for sure.
Thank you so much for answering our questions.
Hey, anytime. Go ahead.
I got a couple questions. So when you talked about supervision, how does choosing your supervisor work, and how important is it to have a clinical supervision?
Well, it's important to have clinical supervision because one of the requirements that you have clinical supervision, when you first get that licensure, right? As soon as you get that licensure, they're going to want to see that you got a clinical supervisor in place. There's multiple ways, to find a clinical supervisor. One, the board has a list. Like if you go on the website for the LCSW board, it'll just type in NC LCSW board, and you'll just kind of see like a list of like different clinical supervisors that provide supervision. I'm on that list as well as many other fellow co-workers and stuff across the state. They're on that list as well. So it's about really finding a supervisor that ultimately you can mesh with, that you can understand, more importantly, when you're communicating and getting what you need, you've got, and mainly just kind of having access to them. So that process is not necessarily that hard, but it is a requirement that you have one, because you're going to need that guidance over the course of however long it takes you to kind of become fully licensed on that journey, right? Like it's bigger than just the first 2 years. Sometimes it takes 3, sometimes it takes 4, sometimes it might take a little longer, give or take. It just depends. But you need a great supervisor that can really unfold and let you know what's out there for you, how to guide you through that process, the ups, the downs, and really just more than anything, be able to kind of release and get anything off your chest from week to week that you might be experiencing. They kind of understand what you should versus what you shouldn't do, right? Like those things that really put you in conflict.
So what qualities should I look for in a supervisor?
Mainly, man, you want to make sure that the trusting relationship between a supervisor and like the the clinician themselves is a little different, right? You just got to trust that they're gonna understand what's expected of you. Like they got to understand like the route that you're on, which most of them should because they probably went through it themselves. Mainly, you just want to make sure that they kind of stay involved in any of the updates and things. Like when things change within the field, they kind of know, what you should be doing and kind of how to help you pivot. They're like, you want to have a supervisor that's sharpening you in some kind of way, right? Training wise, they should be able to point you to the correct EBPs to take if you're taking EBPs, or the correct trainers to take if you're taking trainers. Maybe offering some trainers themselves to you from the ground up to make sure you understand what needs to take place, right? Like honestly and truthfully, just having that working relationship to where if something happens, you can call and get guidance. That's mainly what you want to look for. Like you just want to have somebody that's readily available. And that doesn't mean around the clock, but you know how to get in contact with them, whether it's through sending an email, whether it's through sending a text, until you can get that supervision that you have that week. Most issues can be discussed within that week in terms of the supervision you would have, though.
Okay. So like once you have your LCSW, what are the best ways to continue to grow professionally?
Man, honestly, it just depends on what population you're working with. It just depends on if you're working with children and adolescents, like I think that's ultimately what you said you want to do. Honestly, keep getting better in treating that population. Find different ways to engage your clients. Find different activities and things that you can do. And, long-term planning, I mean, you got 2 years to kind of run on your A, but long-term thinking, if you're thinking about, private practice and those things in the future, kind of understand what you want, what makes you different. Try to be different than, somebody else doing it. You don't got to be the same. Like, really find out what works for you and, just stay consistent.
Okay. So like speaking to you, like what unexpected challenges or surprises did you face after obtaining your LCSW?
Unexpected, I guess only thing unexpected that I could think of that really came out of left field would be something to the effect of I get balancing my schedule in the beginning was really tough. That was unexpected because I thought I was somebody that was always in control of my schedule, and I always felt like structural wise I could do anything that I need to do. And walking around with that persona, like you start to really feel like you Superman, you can do it all. And I start realizing like, man, you can't take on every client. You can't do it. I tried it and it won't do anything but burning me out. And it was running into conflict with having appointments so close together, back to back to back. It was unexpected, the time that it actually takes with some of the clients. Sometimes sessions are going to run over and you have to be prepared for that structurally with your other clients. So that was definitely unexpected when I first got in the field. I didn't expect that to be taking place for sure.
So how did you navigate, through the spaces and where there may be a lack of representation for Black social workers?
Well, in terms of like the representation itself for a Black social worker, at the end of the day, I believe all of us have a purpose in what we do, right? Like I never looked at it in the sense of, okay, I'm just trying to do this because I'm Black and it's a whole for social workers. It was just something that I have a love for and a passion for. And at the end of the day, being Black, I know some of the stereotypes that come with being a Black male in the field and just in mental health in general. Like we're scared often. A lot of us are scared to ask for help, right? And we believe in that because of the stigma. Like we're supposed to be strong, hard. We don't share our feelings. We don't show no emotions. And oftentimes, man, it takes people like us to really connect with that population so that they can see it's okay to ask for help, man. And they could be very different than what they've been grown and taught. And honestly, just making sure that they understand that we have a voice just as well as anybody. But across the board as a social worker, I mean, I work with every population. You got to be able to be diverse, right? I work with diverse populations. I don't care, Black, white, Spanish, Puerto Rican, whatever. You come across my desk, I'm working with you. You know, if it's something that we can connect on, you know, ultimately the part about being Black is simply this: understand who you are, understand your morals and values, and understand that they may differ from other people's morals and values. That's okay. That's how we connect. That's how we start to really build these relationships and really learn and grow in other areas. Because helping, it shouldn't be like a certain race. It shouldn't be anything that's tied to the helping profession. We're here to benefit the field in general and just every person that we touch. So, you know, realistically, man, speaking, although I understand, like some people only like they're gonna come to you at the end of the day, they're gonna look at you and be like, hey, I'm a Black male, he's a Black male. You know, because of that, that breeds connection. That doesn't necessarily always mean it's gonna build a great relationship in terms of progress. So it's always gonna be bigger than that. You got to be having a skill set. You got to be able to provide something that's gonna have them grow. And it's always gonna be like that, no matter what population it is. They need to be seeing the value in treatment and ultimately what role you can play in getting them there for sure.
Okay.
Any other questions? I think we did good today. Well, I appreciate all y'all coming on today. Y'all fired off a lot of questions, even more than I thought y'all would for sure, man. But I appreciate you guys coming on, man, and I look forward to working with all y'all like all of y'all in the future in different aspects of what you decide to do. And if you got questions, you already know, reach out to me for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you for having me.
Thank
hey,
you.
you're welcome.
Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. Hey, you're welcome. You're welcome. And that is it for today on Chasing Your Dream podcast for sure.